So growing up in rural northern Michigan, I did a lot of fishing, and I never thought in my wildest dreams that the fishing I'll be talking about today has absolutely nothing to do with aquatic wildlife. Um, it has to do with our businesses, our employees, and the things that they're going to see almost every single day, and the decisions that they have to make. So if you've never heard of fishing, or you don't really know the entirety of it, or if you've never even heard of spearfishing or whaling, let's talk about it. All right, welcome back. It's week 2 of our month of March 2022, focused on social engineering. So let's kind of recap what we talked about last week, in that social engineering usually involves 4 different phases of an attack. So let's cover those real quick, right? So there's investing, where the attacker tries to identify the victims and determines the best method of attack. A lot of times that's automated, especially when we start talking about phishing. They're just blasting out and seeing who they can hook, right? Which actually moves us on to hooking, right? When an attacker starts to actually engage with the victims, they begin to create trust through messaging. And that's basically what the essence of what phishing is. It's the essence of what social engineering is. And then they actually launch the attack. So the attack could be something like some sort of attachment in the email, or it could be something like they're just trying to get them to click a link. And then once that's all said and done, once they have what they need, they get into the exit phase and they try to clean up everything they can. If it's a link or an email, they don't really care so much about that. They'll clean it up. But if they got somebody hooked, if they got into somebody's email account, they started sending out messages, they do some pretty crazy stuff, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So that's the essence of a social engineering attack. Just a reminder, if you didn't see last week's video, that's how an attack happens. The whole idea is to create trust with the victim and to convince the victim to do something that they may not want to do. So let's move on. Let's actually talk about what phishing is, what spearfishing is, and what whaling really is. All right, let's just set the stage with how a phishing attack works. A phishing attack is basically when they're going to send a message, mostly email. There's other types of attacks you can do, but we have different names for them, like smishing, which is SMS phishing, or vishing, which is like voicemail phishing. But let's focus on email, because email is probably the number one target that we see for these types of attacks. So what is in a threat actor, a hacker, a bad actor trying to do in a phishing email? And the idea is to get the victim's attention. And once they get their attention, it's a call to action. So it's going to arouse curiosity with the victim, maybe ask for help, pulling other emotional triggers. So they'll often use logos, images, text styles to spoof the organization's identity or another organization's identity, to make it seem like that message actually originates from maybe a work colleague, a customer, a bank, or some other official channel. So they try to make it look as official as possible. Now, a lot of times there's spelling mistakes and things like that, but what we've seen is these actors are hiring English speakers, hiring people who are really good at writing English. So the language that you see on a phishing email is getting better. There's not all these mistakes. Now, there are some that get sent out that are just mistake laden, and they're just trying to blast out to as many people as they can to get them to click. But for the most part, they're getting a lot better, which also means they're getting by certain filters. So most phishing messages are going to have a sense of urgency that causes the victim to believe that there will be some negative consequence if they don't give up that sensitive information quickly. So historically, what we've seen is it's going to be something like, hey, click here, log in Office 365, Microsoft 365. Click here, log into G Suite. Click here, log in here. Click here, log in here. Click, it could be Chase Bank. It could be Bank of America. They're trying to create some sort of urgency, like, hey, your account's been hacked. Sign in here to verify, fraud alert, things like that. So that's the essence of a phishing email. Now, when we start looking at spear phishing, that's a more targeted attack. And there's a big distinction between spearfishing and whaling. Whaling is a type of spearfishing, but whaling is when you're going exclusively after high-ranking individuals inside of an organization. So senior management, the president of the company, the CEO, other level executives, or it could just be somebody that's famous. So spearfishing is a direct attack, a targeted attack on a certain individual, but that's usually a low-level individual. When it comes to whaling, that's when you get up into the high-level individual. And in our world, And in the business world, a whale is a much better target than just like a low-level employee, because you're probably going to have access to certain levels of things. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're the CEO of a company, and this is kind of based on a true story, so stick with me. You're CEO of a company, and you somehow clicked on a phishing email. You got phished. You don't admit to anybody because you don't want to. Maybe you're embarrassed, whatever. They have access to your email, and you don't even know it. They've now set up rules that redirect emails into folders that, based on certain criteria, that you'll never see. And then they start acting like you. They start reading through emails. They see that there maybe is a deal going on. And you're flying out, and then there's a CFO that's involved that has to wire money. And they act as you, sending email to the CFO, and once they see the deal's done, maybe they change the wiring instructions. Maybe it's you communicating out to a customer, or some high-ranking official in your company communicating out to a customer and getting them to send money to a bad wire situation. Those happen all the time. Now we just experienced one. This is pretty targeted, where the user somehow got their credentials stolen. Now that could have been a phishing email. We're not entirely sure at the origin of it, but they got their email credentials stolen. Now, this specific customer has not implemented multi-factor authentication, which we've recommended multiple times, and now we're in the process of doing that. But just to give you an idea, they got access to a sales associate. That sales associate didn't know. There were multiple rules set up. And they figured out who was HR in the company, because they'll do recon on the company. They'll figure out who HR is. They'll look at your emails and say who you've communicated with. They wrote one of the most convincing emails I've ever seen, and I'll probably do another video on this, but they even sent a fake voided check to the HR person to change the direct deposit payment for this employee. And unfortunately, it got changed. And when it got changed, there was a fail-safe in there where the employee got texted saying, hey, this has changed. And the employee ignored the text. So even though there was a fail-safe, what we've learned is that in that situation, that employee had no idea. No idea these emails were going back and forth. And the person, the hacker inside their email, was acting like them, was typing nearly as like them. So it was very hard to distinguish. I don't blame the person in HR that changed it. Now, what does that lead to? That's led to an organizational change where there's a policy in place where that can never happen again. That change will not happen based on that email. There has to be physical or verbal confirmation from the actual employee. And there's some other policies there. And then we learned, when the employee gets texted, maybe they should respond to the text. So they're out the paycheck. But it could have been worse. What if it was the CEO's paycheck? What if it was somebody high up in the company? What if it was a worrying situation? So these are the things we got to think about. So let's talk about next, what are some of the things that we can do inside our companies to kind of minimize the damage when this happens? So first and foremost, we have to educate our employees. And we have to educate our employees to understand that if they see an email that's suspicious, they need to forward it or call and talk to somebody who can work with them and try to show them that maybe this email is legitimate and maybe it's not. And that's important. Now, for our customers, we do it a special way. We're like, dude, just forward us the email, call us, pick up the phone and call us. Let us look at it with you. We'd rather you take the time and call us and we work with you than to make a mistake. Because cleanup is terrible. Cleanup sucks. And it's embarrassing if something bad actually happens. So we start with education, and then we have to test our users. Unfortunately, we have to send them phishing emails. There's multiple ways that we can do that, but we have to send it to them because we have to figure out who in your company is more vulnerable than somebody else. It's not to trick the employees. It's to teach them and find out who your weak points are and help that employee improve. It's not something that should be shamed. It's not something that we want to make sure people feel bad about. It's something that we want to make sure that we educate the user, make sure they're doing the right thing. And this does not exclude you. If you're the CEO, if you're the president, if you're an executive in the company, it doesn't exclude you. Remember that. You're just as important, actually far more important than somebody that maybe is just like a low-level worker for you. That doesn't mean that the work that they do is not important. What it means is you're a target. If they can get to a whaling attack and they can get to you, they can do far more damage to your business than they can usually from a sales associate, from even somebody in HR, from somebody that works in manufacturing, or maybe somebody that does bookkeeping with you. But the one thing we have to keep in mind is everybody needs to be educated. Everybody needs to take this seriously, and it starts at the top. So I hope this was informative to you. Like, comment down below, subscribe. Next week, we're going to follow up with some more. I'm going to talk about some more social engineering attacks. And the final week that we talk about, I think I'm going to break down what happened exclusively with that fake check. I'm going to sanitize it. We're going to show that. So again, like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, stay cyber safe.